Uh, Thank you for coming. I know it's early, and I really appreciate you guys coming out and watching the presentation. Thank you for the introduction. Today we're going to talk about malware automation. But before we begin, I'll just discuss the most important part of the presentation. Who am I? As mentioned, I'm the principal malware scientist at RSA, and also the author of Malware Rootkits and Botnets. It's a trilogy, so this is the first part. I'm working on the other two. So if you have a budget for a book this year, please get a copy of the book. All proceeds go to my two kids' 529 college fund. And as we all know, college is very expensive, so please get a copy. It's on sale in Amazon, by the way. And as mentioned, I was with Dambala for 3 years, F-Secure for 3 years, and Trend Micro for 8 years. Trend Micro is where I started my career. They hired me fresh out of college, and then they trained me how to reverse malware. So I'm forever grateful for Trend Micro. And you can follow me at Twitter, send me a message, ask me questions. I'm always happy to help out. If it's an easy question, I answer immediately. If it's a little bit harder, sometimes it takes me time to answer. It takes me months or years, but I will answer your questions. And if you want to read my blog in RSA, that's the link, bit.ly tops blog. And about our team, we're called the RSA First Watch. We're a threat research team. You can follow us at RSA First Watch, and all our blogs are in blogs.rsa.com. All right, so about the talk. So today, I'm going to give you an over-the-shoulder view of how attackers create malware in an automated fashion. So for us to understand that, we would be discussing first the current state of malware, the attacker's arsenal, and then the creation process of an army of armored malware. And we will also discuss the advantages of automation, and then I will show you guys a demo. So I learned a hard lesson. I usually give live demos. I have a live demo here, but just in case, I have a video backup. All right, so the current state of malware. So as you can see here in this chart, this actually represents the total number of unique malware that has been discovered year on year. So this chart was updated last October 5th, and as you can see, compared to 2012, it's already like 60 million more unique malware that were discovered. But then again, there's a flaw in this chart, the way it represents uniqueness in malware. Because here, it represents uniqueness in malware based on hash. So that means if you get a malware file, add 1 byte at the end of that file, rehash it, then they would say it's a totally unique malware. But then again, it's just the same malware. So that's one thing that's wrong with this chart. But every year we get charts like this from our security providers designed to scare us, I think. But then again, all of these statistics here, they're real. And this only represents those that were discovered. It doesn't represent malware that hasn't been discovered yet. So a friend of mine, Mr. Solomon Sonia, when he presented in Hacker Halted, one of the figures he cited is that multiply this by 4, and that's the number of malware that hasn't been discovered yet. So before, when it comes to campaigns or malware outbreak, there's only one malware involved. So if you get a copy of that malware, create a solution for that malware, deploy the solution, you basically stop the malware outbreak. So that's the end of the story. So SQL Slammer, Melissa, I Love You, Worm, My Doom, all of those attacks were named after the malware because it was only one malware that was responsible for those attacks. But today, most of the attack campaigns that we see, they are using an army of armored malware. So it's not just one malware or one family of malware. They use multiple families to conduct their attack. The main concern of the attackers is the functionality of the malware. If the malware has the functionality they need, they will use it in their campaign. And if you stop one malware, you just stop that malware. The other malware that are in part of that campaign, they keep on doing their own directive, And if they're stealing information, they keep on sending information to the attackers. So how are they doing it? They have tools. So they have the DIY kits. They use armoring tools. And they also use AV scanners as part of their QA, which I will explain later in this presentation. So when I was starting my career, this was the first DIY kit that I stumbled upon. This was created by a 15-year-old kid. He was 15 years old during this time from Chicago. And this was really cool when the first time I saw this kit, because you don't need to have assembly language skills to actually create your own malware. Unlike before, if you want to create malware, you need to know assembly language skills. But here, you just need to know the command line. You can create your malware. And other groups, one which calls themselves PSMPC, also created their own. So the same concept. You just need to know the command line, and then you could create your own malware. Or during that time, virus. That's why VCL, Virus Creation Labs. Fast forward 10, 15 years, we get SpyEye, and we get SUSE. So the things that you need to take away from this presentation are the main differences between these two sets of kits. So the kits before, they were more about a pissing contest, like my kit is better than your kit. While the kits today, they're more geared for online crime, like stealing information, making money for the creators who bought the tools that they use in their campaign. It's more about cybercrime. And another thing that we need to remember also when comparing the kits of old to the kits of today is that VCL and PSMPC, they can only create finite number of malware samples. So if they can only create 20 samples, 50 samples, it's very easy to create solutions for those. You don't even need to reverse engineer the kit. You just need to generate all those samples, and then you can solve them. That's why they were cool, but they were not that hard to stop. We could create signatures for all of those in one day. But with SpyEye and Zeus, virtually, they can create infinite number of unique malware samples. That's because they use time as a seed. So as long as time exists, they would create unique infinite malware samples. So the only time they won't create a unique malware sample is that if the universe ripped and we're all back into being stardusts. So armoring tools. So most of the DIY kits, they already offer some sort of armoring or protection for the malware. But of course, the attackers won't rely solely on the protective mechanisms being offered by the DIY kits. So they use armoring tools as well. So one of the most popular armoring tools are packers. So we have different packers. We have UPX, we have PE Lite, the media and all that. And some of them, like for this one, these are just based on free modules that you can Google. And most attackers, they would just create a fancy GUI out of those publicly available modules, and then they would sell this in different hacker forums. And some script kiddies would actually buy this for like $10, $15 a pop. So if they have 1,000 customers for $10, that's $10,000 for them already. And it only takes like a couple of hours for them to create this. So like for this one, this is also another example of an encryptor packer. But this one offers additional options. So as you can see on the right, it says there it can compress resources. It has anti-debugger crack. It can compress icons. Most of these features actually work, but some of them, they don't work. But some of the buyers of these tools, they really don't check. So for me, the way I analyze all of this is that I have a pawn file. So I would subject that pawn file to each of these options. But then sometimes when you look at it, it's just garbage of code. They just add garbage of code. Sometimes it's all of them are only like not operations, XOR a register, and then that's it. But still, some people would buy this. But of course, that doesn't mean that some of the options here don't work. Some of the more important ones, they really work, and they give researchers and security products a hard time, especially when when it comes to analyzing and reversing malware. So another armoring tool, like for this one, indetectables.net, some people, if they don't have access to those tools that I mentioned, you could go online, and then get services like this. So indetectables.net, when I was doing my research on this was free. But now you need to have a certain code, and you need to know the secret URL so that you can access this website. So what it does, it asks you to upload your files, and then it would give you an encrypted version of it. But of course, if I were a customer of this one, I would think twice about uploading my files, because then there's nobody or nothing stopping them from keeping those files that I'm uploading to their website. Because number one, I don't know who owns the websites, but still, people would actually get the services of these websites. And in underground, you could actually sell malware samples for 1 cent or even to $1, depending on how sophisticated that malware sample is. So if they're able to gather 1 million malware samples, then they just encrypt it, send it to sell it in the underground for 1 cent. That's a lot of money for these people who are running the website. Plus, having services like this, you're actually victimized in 3 ways. So number one, you just gave them your file, and number two, you just gave them your credit card number so that you could get the key codes and the secret URL to license their website. Plus, they charge you 10, 15 euros for that access. So you're actually been victimized 3 times. So another armoring tool is it's called the file joiner and an exe bundler. So these 2 tools, I always call them the information routine converted into a tool. So before, most infection routine are built into the viruses or into the malware, because their main concern is to infect all the files in the system. So if they happen to infect a very popular program, somebody would copy that, transfer it to a diskette, and then that diskette would be lent to a friend, and then that friend would put in the PC, execute that program, and then the PC would get infected. But of course, nowadays, malware writers don't concern themselves with infection routines. But if they're going to spread their program all over the world and make it enticing, they use these kinds of tools to bundle their program with very popular applications. So I don't have a screenshot here, but there are tools also like this that are for Android apps. So you just write your own malicious Java code and then bundle it with an Android app, and then you can post it in third-party Google Play locations. So the main idea here is that you get a very popular app, you get your malicious program, bundle it together, and then spread it around. You could post it in file sharing websites. You could use a peer-to-peer program, or whatever ways you want to share your program, as long as it's very enticing. Now, when this tool first came out, software publishers, what they did is that they started posting the hash of their software that users download. But then, of course, if their website is not secure enough, nobody's preventing the hackers, or I should say, hackers are good people, the attackers, from compromising their website and changing the hash to reflect the hash of their creation bundled with the legitimate software. So AV scanners. AV scanners, they're used for quality assurance purposes. Now, if it's a highly funded attacker group, they could have different virtual machines that have different security products installed so that they could submit all their creations there and see whether it's detected or not. And some of them even have security appliances that they have in their lab, depending on how much money the sponsor has. But for this one, if you don't have all of that resources, some of them just use a multi-AV scanner. So this one actually downloads all of the engines from popular vendors and then subject their malware creation here to check whether it's detected or not. It's like an on-premise VirusTotal. But then again, the disadvantage of using this tool is that when they remove some of the features that cause all of these AV engines to actually have conflict when they're installed on the system, they also remove the dynamic scanning features. So what's left there is that only the static scanning using signatures or whatever the security product is using. It virtually killed the heuristics and dynamic capability of the security products. Although they understand that risk, most attacker groups still use this kind of tools. Now, if they're small-time attacker and they don't have money or don't have $10 to buy the tool, they could always go to sites like this, like VirusTotal, NoVirusTanks, and VirScan. But the most popular one that I've always seen used is NoVirusTanks. It's because of the option there that says do not distribute the sample. But then, of course, even if you take that, there's no way of saying that they're really not distributing it to AV companies. Probably there's a EULA there somewhere that says, even if you take this, if you find this to be detected by 5 or more AV vendors, we will automatically submit this to security companies. But then, of course, some attackers, they would actually risk it. Because the fact of the matter is that most security companies, they receive hundreds of thousands of samples a day. And like our keynote this morning, prioritization is important if you cannot do it, if you cannot do everything. So nobody can process hundreds of thousands of samples a day. So what security companies do is that they prioritize all of these samples. Samples coming from high-paying customers are handled first, and those that come from these sources like this, usually it sits there for months. Even if they have automated systems that automatically analyze malware, create signature for those malwares, some of these samples, they sit there for months, even years. That's why it's always funny when a big company gets infected. Most AV companies would say, hey, we have that sample in our collection the past 3 months. It just so happens that we didn't have the manpower to look at it. All right, so the process. If you have a DIY kit, you would be able to produce your DIY kit malware. And then that malware, you can subject it to different standalone armoring tools. You can mix and match together the different armoring tools. The more you have, the more you randomize the order of the tools, the more you mess up the researchers that would try to analyze and reverse the malware and also confuse the security products that you're up against. So always remember that the attacker's creation, the malware, it's up against two foes, the researcher and the security products. And most of these tools actually take care of making sure those two foes have their lives miserable when they're handling these kinds of malware. And once you have actually submitted all of those different standalone armoring tools, then the quality assurance process begins. Now, they can use on-premise AV, in the cloud AV, different security appliances, network appliances, IDS and all that. It depends on how much they're funded. And then if it passes their quality assurance, then you have an army of armored malware. And also, if you don't have money to buy a DIY kit, like Carburp, before it was leaked out, it was reportedly being sold underground for 40 grand a pop. But then after it got leaked out, you can just Google it for $0 and you can get a copy of it. Kim.com actually hosts a copy of that in his mega upload site. So if you don't have money for that, you can always use old malware and subject them to different standalone armoring tools, do quality assurance, and then you have an army of armored malware. Actually, because of this, it gave me, I had a talk like this, I think like a couple of years ago. I called it the green malware, made from 100% recycled malware. Because you just get malware and then it's made new again by all of these tools. Now, the inspiration for that talk was that in my previous adventure, one client actually approached me and he said, or they said, we got infected by a very sophisticated malware. Now, most Fortune companies, when they get infected, they always say it's a very complicated malware. But then after peeling away all of the protective mechanisms, after weeks and months of work, I found out that that malware is like between 5 to 10 years old. It's a very old malware. That actually strengthens my belief that attackers really don't care whether the malware is new or old, as long as it has the behavior that they need or the capability that they need. And once it has, actually their main concern is the capability and then protecting their creation. So once they find something that has the capability they need, the only thing they need to do is to make sure it's protected enough so that it could bypass different security products, and it can make life hard for researchers if ever their samples get captured and subjected to different malware analysis methods. So speaking of QA, quality assurance, so the quality assurance actually depends on the attack type. So we know two attack types. One is a targeted attack. So in a targeted attack, if the malware can escape through different security products employed by the company or the enterprise they're trying to attack, they wouldn't mind releasing that malware. Even if it's detected by 95% of all security products or 95% of all the security appliances, if it's not detected by the 5%, and it just so happens that 5% is the one being used by the company, they wouldn't mind deploying it. So when it comes to QA, it depends actually on how they would attack. It depends on the type of attack. Now also when it comes to targeted attacks, mostly those that are targeted are people that have access to sensitive information within their company. Sometimes it's based on roles. Probably they would target the C-level executives or network management, any person within the company that has access to sensitive information within the company. Now, if the company doesn't have any segmented network, meaning if a receptionist computer can have access to sensitive data, then they wouldn't mind targeting the receptionist. And for them, it's much more easier because most of the time, when there's a security education going on in the company, usually the receptionist is left out. Most of the employees are attending the security awareness, and most of the people are left out, like the receptionists. So, and also for this one, like based on my experience, every time we would talk to a company in my previous adventure, we would also talk to the family members of these people, like their immediate family members or members living in the same house. We made them aware also of security and also leaking out information within their social media circles. Like for one example, let's say he's a C-level executive in a Fortune 100 company, and he's attending LASCON, and he has a daughter. And the daughter would say, "Hey guys, party at my place. My dad is in this weird conference. I have no idea what it is. It's called LASCON. He's there until Monday, so party at my place." Now, if attackers are actually monitoring all of his family's social network, that would give them enough information to actually try to phish him. Now, they could send him email, "Thank you for attending LASCON. We really appreciate your attendance. Please click this link to print out a certificate." Or if there's an attachment there, "Please click the attachment. It's a sign of our thank you," and all that. Now, if he's tech savvy, he would say, "Oh, I know this is just a hoax." But then again, not all people are tech savvy enough to actually not do what the email is saying. Now, most attackers, if he's really a high-profile target and they really want to get into the company, some of them won't send him email. Instead, they would send him a snail mail. Probably that snail mail would have a printout of a URL, or it would have a USB stick, or whatever, or anything there that would actually make him do something to that malware deployment technology and have malware installed in his system. And of course, another attack type is opportunistic attack. So every time I think of opportunistic, it reminds me of Oprah Winfrey. You know how in her show, she always says, "Too bad I'm not Oprah, or else I would tell you guys, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car." And all of you will be this happy. So she likes to give away stuff to everybody. So opportunistic attack is like that. The attackers spread the malware and they really don't care who gets infected. At the end of the day, they just check their control panel and see how many they get infected. And if it's an opportunistic attack, when it comes to quality assurance, now they're more concerned about their creation not being detected by most security products and security appliances. And once they become successful, of course, they're all happy. They reap the rewards of stealing all of those information from the compromised machines. So, why are they doing this? Exponential effect. The more you have, the more chances of you winning. And also, if you don't want to use it in a campaign, you can always sell it in the underground. Imagine if you can produce hundreds of thousands of samples a day and you have buyers for 1 cent a pop, that's a lot of money. And easy malware update, also to knock AV out. Not only AV, but most security vendors, even security appliances. It depends on the budget the attacker group has and the amount of security appliances and security products they have access to. So exponential effect, as I said, you can produce infinite amount of malware samples and then you can mix and match them. So even if you just have one malware from the malware DIY kit or even from an old malware, you can do this. But the good thing about malware DIY kits, especially if it's the one that can produce infinite number of malware samples, you can just create as many as you want, just get one, subject it into an armoring tool. Now most armoring tools also use time as a seed, so based on one sample, you can also create infinite amount of malware samples. And then and so on and so forth. So this actually makes things hard for researchers and automated systems. Now, if you're not really familiar with the different DIY kits and the different tools, most researchers, even automated systems, would say, you just got infected by this malware family named this. Oh, you got infected again? Oh, that's a different family. It's now, we call this, and that. So the naming becomes screwed up. But then if you really take the time to peel away all of those armoring that has been put in that malware, you'll find out that once you reach the germ is the pure malware code, unadulterated, without any protective mechanism. You'll find out that they're all the same. Like in one day, the samples you see, like the 50,000 samples, they all boil down to just one germ. So in the future, hopefully, instead of using the chart like that to identify uniqueness, we would actually get reports of malware instead of millions and millions. Say, this year we saw 15 malware families doing the rounds, and then probably next year we'll say we only saw 10, but these 10 malware families are much more powerful than the 15 that we saw last year. And actually that's what I'm doing in RSA First Watch, is trying to come up with a yearly report that really represents malware uniqueness based on family and not based on hash. All right, easy malware update. So unique samples per malware deployment technology. So what's a malware deployment technology? So it's a technology that attackers use to have their creation reach the target. Not really executing the target, but just reaching the target. So what are the most popular malware deployment technology? We have the drive-by download, we have emails, and we also have USB sticks, especially those that are given away in conferences, the one you have in your bag. So make sure before you do anything with it, you plug it in to an air-gapped system. So let's take, for example, email. So let's say I have a botnet, and then my botnet has the capability to spam millions and millions of samples. But then I just want to target one company, and that company has 50 employees. So I would tell my botnet, create 50 spams targeting this company. Now the question is, how do I get their email? How do I get their information and all that? I actually have a blog written about that in RSA. So let's say I already have their email addresses. So my botnet would actually spam 50 email samples. 50 emails to those 50 employees within the company. So let's say one IT guy who's a security expert get that spam, and he say, "Oh, this is very obvious. This is a spam mail," and then he would send it to his security provider. And then the security provider would say, "You know what? You're a high-paying customer, so we'll give you a solution in 2 hours." But then again, we have to remember that the way most security companies define solution is not really a solution. It's just detection. When you say solution, you have to completely eradicate the threat from the system. But then again, given that the sophistication of malware today, they're like the aliens in falling skies. Once they embed themselves into the human host, taking them out kills the human host. It's the same thing with computers. Sometimes when you try to clean them up, you actually mess up the whole operating system. So let's say, yeah, I'll give you a solution in 2 hours. So he gets the solution, he deploys it to the company, and then he happily reports to the CTO, "Hey, don't worry about that spam we got a couple of hours ago. I already have a solution. I've already deployed it. We're protected." But then the next day, the network ad said, "Hey, I thought we're protected, but according to my logs, I still see some information being exfiltrated out of our company." So that happens because the 50 email samples that were produced or that was spanned by the botnet, it actually contains 50 unique malware samples. So the one that was caught by the security expert or the IT security expert, that sample, you won't see it ever again. You would only see it one time. And the solution that he deployed only solved that one sample. It didn't solve the other 49 samples that were sent out to the other employees. That's why in the industry, I really don't believe wherein people would say, "Hey, we've analyzed this malware. These are the hashes." Because chances are you wouldn't see those hashes ever again. You would only see it once. So one thing that could have happened, that's why they became compromised. Probably one non-technical savvy user got that email, was gullible enough to follow whatever that email said, click the link, execute the file, or whatever, and that computer got infected, and from that computer, the infection spreads. So that's what usually happens. So when we're actually dealing with attacks today, as I mentioned earlier, we're not dealing with a single malware alone. We now deal with different families of unique malware. And also when it comes to malware serving domains, it can rotate malware in minutes. So what's a malware serving domain? So when it comes to a botnet actually uses three major network infrastructure. One is the CNC, the one we always hear, the one that actually influences how the malware behaves in the system. One is the domain drop zone. If it's an information stealing malware, all of the information it steals, it sends it out to that domain. If it's a primitive one, probably it uses a SMTP to send out stolen information. Now another network resource that it uses is a malware serving domain. So usually the malware serving domain contains the configuration files, malware updates, component updates, whatever that the malware needs to function in the system. Now, malware before, when it attacks your system, usually it's only one file. Everything is packaged into that one file. But malware today, they're made out of different components. You have the rootkit component, the one that's responsible for hiding the malware. You have the attack component. That attack component functions depending on the directive of the attacker. If it's a DDoS attack, that attack component has the capability to do DDoS. If it's an information stealing attack, that component is probably a memory scraper, a keylogger, or whatever. And most importantly, this is my favorite. I call it the Horcrux component. So if you're fans of Harry Potter, so a Horcrux component is that it checks the infected system from time to time to see whether there are components missing. Probably an incident responder came in, he removed one component thinking everything's good. But then the Horcrux component would say, hey, something's broken. So the Horcrux component would actually rebuild it, and sometimes the files that it needs are in the malware serving domains. So that's one purpose of the malware serving domain. Now, let's say the botnet or the malware that infected the system uses a malware serving domain that have access to millions or even just thousands of malware samples. So a company would say, hey, I think we're infected based on our very sophisticated and expensive security product. Computer A is where the infection is. So an incident responder would come there, do forensics on computer A, and he finds out, oh yeah, I was able to get the sample. So I'll get back to you tomorrow. I'll send you the solution that you can deploy. So they deployed the solution, it removed the malware or detected it, and then they do their remediation probably from backup or whatever. But then again, the next day, the same network security ad would say, hey, there's still data being exfiltrated in our network. Now, that happens a lot because even if the incident responder was able to get the malware from that system, in 2 hours or in just minutes, it has already been updated by the attacker. So whatever the incident responder was able to extract from that system, that's already old news. So even if he spends days solving that sample is not in the infected machine anymore, or it's not going the rounds in the network anymore. Now, usually malware serving domain, so it will not be detected as much as an anomaly. They would probably update it once every day, once every 2 hours, using disguising themselves as normal traffic. So if you have access to thousands and thousands of malware samples, it's very easy to update the sample in a compromised machine, making the attack very persistent. And also to knock AV out, so malware creation time versus solution cycle time. So malware creation time, as you would see in my demo, it just takes seconds to actually create one unique malware sample. But then the solution cycle time, you're counting hours. Like when I was in Trend Micro, we were promising 2 hours of detection, or else we would pay you back your money. So seconds, hours, it's a losing end for security vendors. And AV evasion is effectively utilized. Before, when a sponsor, if it's a state sponsor or just a criminal underground, they want to have that technology or in their malware when they're doing their attack, they would need to contact directly the person who's an expert in that technology. But nowadays, since they now use tools. Sorry, it messed me up. So nowadays, since people get arrested, some of them get arrested, they would be invited to the US and then they would get arrested. The malware writers, actually, what they did is they tried to have a buffer within the attacker group and themselves. So now they're saying, instead of you hiring me and knowing where to contact me, how I look like and all that, how about you just buy this tool located in this hacker forum and then send me a Western Money Union here in this state, and then I'll have my money mules wire it to me somewhere in Russia, and then I'll give you a key so that whatever functionality you need, you could unlock it in the tool. And since all of the tools are freely available and most attacker groups have money, if you have money, you could just get all of those tools, and then all of the AV evasion technology that are available today, you could use it in your own attack campaign. So that's how easy it is nowadays. And 1:1 signature ratio. So if the researcher is not smart enough or is not aware enough about the different tools attackers use, and the automated systems they're using are not really smart enough, what happens is that they would end up creating one signature for one malware sample. So if it's like 10,000 unique malware samples, they would create 10,000 unique signatures when in fact it's only one germ. And this happens all the time, actually. If you would have a blacklist database that's more than 5 meg, I would ask questions to my security provider. Because usually, if you have all of this, it's in the gigs and gigs. But there was this industry-wide project before, which is called pattern slimming. So what happens there is that all of the in-the-wild malware are only in the ones that's being deployed to the customers, while the gigs and gigs of database are the one that's being given to the testers. So you would read in magazines 100% certified by this magazine, 100% passed this test, but then again, they're using a different set of signatures, which is gigs and gigs, when in fact they're using just a small portion. Because if you would really get those gigs and gigs of database, you would actually kill the bandwidth of your network when you deploy all of those solutions. And understanding the malware requires reversing and not just analysis. Now, if you really want to understand the malware, you really need to reverse it. Now, analysis would reveal some information, but then I always believe that the schoolhouse is on fire and the bank is getting robbed. So sometimes malware would exhibit the most obvious behavior, but then again, you really need to reverse it. That's why most of the reports that come out, they would come out like 6 months, 8 months after the fact, because that's the amount of time that it took them to actually understand the malware. Like for me, if I have a reversing project, if it's a very sophisticated malware, it takes me weeks, even months to actually reverse that malware. So reversing is easier said than done. All right, so we only have 2 minutes. So this is how you create malware. This is in real time, and this is just using a very slow system. So here we would use Zeus. So everything is pre-configured. You just need to turn it on, your automated scripts and all that, and then it could create samples for you. Now the one on the right, you would see just created one sample. Now if you have kids, you could watch your kids' baseball game, basketball game, come back, you'll see thousands and thousands of malware. If you work for the government, you have this running in your government office, the government shuts down, you got furloughed, come back after 16 days, this would still be running and you would have thousands and thousands of malware. So that's how easy it is to create malware samples. Well, I was explaining that it already created 8 unique malware samples. Now when I say unique, this is not unique in hash. It's unique, this is just Zeus. So behavior is the same across the board, but then how it looks on disk and in memory is totally different from one generation to another. Now, so if you're not familiar with the kits, you would say it's a different family altogether. And then you add armoring, it messes things up. Like this armoring, it doesn't use time and date as a seed, it uses random keys. But then again, the number of combinations is in billions and trillions. So it's still like having infinite amount of a malware sample. This one also has added features. It has anti-sandbox technology and all that cool stuff. Like I would explain how they got the idea for the randomization, but if you guys are interested, you can always approach me, because it's a 30-minute explanation. But if you guys are really interested, please feel free to send me a message. So this one, it already, from one sample, from that DIY kit, it already created 3 samples. All right, so let's put it together. An automated system attackers use, just get a bare metal system. You get a virtualized machine with the kit, virtualized machine with the armoring tools. You have shared folders, all the samples produced by the kit, you drop it in that folder. From that folder, drop it to the armoring tools VM. And from there, it drops all of the finished samples in the armored samples folder. Now, all of this can be automated in the bare metal machine just by using agents that actually monitor the different folders. And then once you have all your armored samples, just sit back, enjoy the fruits of your labor, sell it, use it to conduct an attack, and whatever you want to do with it. But I'm not saying you guys do it. This is all for educational purposes. And all the samples are destroyed after all of my experiments, just to make sure that the camera gets that information. And key takeaways. The real story behind it usually is just a handful of kits responsible for the millions and millions of samples we see every year. And the way they do it, they're able to produce those number of samples using automation. And if you have security providers, ask the right questions. So don't just take their word for it, ask the right questions. Now, if they're going to conduct demonstrations within your company, don't let them conduct demo using their own samples. You have to have samples of your own. Probably samples that you were able to collect in your own network, or samples you were able to collect from industry contacts, and then have them try that. because those samples you have, they usually represent real world scenario. And a new solution is needed, so signature-less detection. So I'm actually working on one solution right now utilizing machine learning. It's a year-long project. Hopefully it works, so I won't get fired. And instead of analyzing the malware samples themselves, we need to go after the tools and not the creation. Analyze, reverse engineer the tools, reverse engineer the kits. But then again, it's easier said than done. Attackers realize this, that's why their tools and their kits also have protective mechanisms. It takes a long, when I say long, sometimes years to actually understand one kit. Now, if it's leaked out, their source code, then you're lucky because you just need to read it in English, so which is good. So if you're so inclined, please feel free to give me a standing ovation. This was taken in my previous talk. They were real audience from my previous talk. So again, if you have budget, please buy the book. It's for my kids' college fund. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And thank you very much for attending my talk. I really enjoyed it.